everyone, and welcome back to Geology 106. The time is 2:54, and we are going to be starting at about 3 p.m.-ish. I am still working on your slides, which is why there is not a link in Canvas yet. But I will also not only put those on Canvas, but I'll put a link in the chat when those are finally done. But they will be done very soon, I promise. So, slides coming soon. Check in. How is everyone doing? Finish getting these slides. Today's lecture is going to be short. Isn't that awesome? Yes. Woohoo. My knowledge on deserts is somewhat limited compared to the other topics that we've talked about. So I can't talk on and on forever about them. So lecture is going to be shorter. Because it's an area where I don't think I really had a ton of formal training on. But whatever. Echo's good. Awesome. Probably only going to go over like 20 slides today, maybe. This is my focus face, in case you guys are wondering. Sometimes I do this in meetings where I'm taking notes on the meetings, and I have this kind of like grimace sort of on my face. And I realize that my colleagues probably don't realize that I'm making notes. They probably just think that I'm like giving them a skeptical look or something like that. Excuse me. I am glad that I do talk about deserts because it's something that I wish I had learned more about. So we got another person on today. If you feel comfortable saying how you're doing, how are you doing? Life's been, life has been hectic lately. So how are all of you guys like hanging in there and stuff, All right, I am very close to being done. We got about 2 minutes left. just happened? Trying to make all your guys fill in the blanks and stuff. Still only 2 peeps today with only 1 minute to go. So looks like people are, hopefully we'll get some more to join. I really do enjoy it when people join the live lecture, because then when you guys have questions, you guys can we can have some back and forth. Like if anyone has questions. Yeah, everyone does kind of shamble in a little late. It's just kind of like populates. It's like, she's just going to make announcements, or, wait for me so I can, wait a little longer, I guess. I don't know. Who is excited to get haircuts of the 3 of you guys who are here? I know I can't wait, but maybe I can. I don't know. Still working on these slides. Thank goodness most of y'all are late. Oh, let's leave those last 2 on there actually for the shared slide. All right, and let's make this public for y'all to see. Oh, they changed the thing. Darn it. They changed the layout of how I share stuff. Wasn't really a problem for Alicia. For me, it's starting to be a problem. I like my hair shorter in the winter than it currently is. Or shorter in the summer than it currently is, if I said winter. It's super long. I'm thinking of maybe just waiting maybe 1 more month or something, hoping that this will get long enough that I can donate it. I don't know. We'll find out. Okay, so I have your slides here. Boom, right there are the slides for you guys. I will also post those in the class page there. If I can find where I have so many windows open with multiple tabs on them. Just disorganized today. So your focus questions aren't up yet. They will be soon. They will be by, probably this evening. And so will the lab. I just need to go back through the lab and make sure that all the instructions are really clear. You guys will be using Google Earth, so you will need to download it. Don't worry, it's free. And you can download it either to a phone or to a computer. I recommend using a computer because I believe that you guys will have more options, like more tools that are a bit easier to utilize and find if you're using a computer versus a smartphone. And I will actually go over a little bit of how to use the Google Earth at the end of this, just a little bit to kind of get you guys started. I know I hadn't used Google Earth myself until someone taught me how. Geologists actually use Google Earth a lot, and you guys use a very simple version of Google Earth probably a lot if you guys use Google for directions. Or if you search a location and then you look at the maps to find out information about a certain location, Google Maps is a very, very simplified version of Google Earth. So if you're familiar with using Google Maps online for directions or anything else, then I think that it'll be kind of a somewhat easy transition to use Google Earth because it's very similar. just with more stuff, which will be useful for you guys. So let's go ahead then and get started chatting about deserts. Second slide there is who cares? Let's kind of frame this with why should we care about deserts at all? What is important about a desert? Why should I bother learning about it? Let's see some ideas in the chat. There's 4 of you guys here, so I would super love to see 4 comments in the chat. Maybe just throwing out some ideas of why you think it might be important to study a desert area or just know about deserts. And I know there's kind of a lag with the chat. Solar power. I actually didn't have that one on my own list. I like that because deserts are great areas to get solar power. We also have an arid climate, desert, semi-arid, steppy, not sure where you would classify it, but we have a semi-arid climate in Eastern Washington. I call it a desert, although it might be more appropriately named a semi-arid climate as opposed to a desert. Rare earth minerals, there are definitely, I don't know about rare earth minerals, but there are a lot of valuable mineral resources that accumulate in deserts. Solar power, though, I like that. In our Eastern Washington semi-arid climate, we don't harvest a lot of solar power out there, but we do harvest a lot of wind power out there because a lot of deserts are kind of flat with just large sand dunes, but we don't really have sand dunes out there. I think it's because it's more of like a semi-arid climate. So some of the reasons that I listed why it's important to study deserts. I did have the economic mineral resources listed on there. Yeah, the wind farms, I saw Alicia's comment, the wind farms are very impressive out in Eastern Washington. There's a lot of them. And there's also a lot of opportunities, I think, for internships at those wind farms. So if that's something you guys are interested in, looking into alternative energies, it's kind of like a career path. I think that those wind farms out there offer like internships. Anyways, economic mineral resources is one thing I have listed. Some such minerals would be salt, like in the Great Salt Lake, or gypsum. You can also get gypsum out there. Zinc, uranium, lead, lithium, gold, and silver have all been found in economically viable deposits in deserts. And then also, additionally, ecology and biodiversity. There's a lot of unique animals and plants that live in deserts. I have depicted there a little fennec fox. If anyone has seen a Gretzko, or I think it's called a Gretzko, on Netflix, one of the characters in that show is a fennec fox, and her name is Fenneco. The first picture up there, by the way, I believe is some gypsum deposits that are growing up out of the ground. Another reason why deserts are important is that it is a climate indicator. If deserts are expanding and also migrating farther north, that's an indicator that the climate is changing. Also, there's a lot of archaeology that goes on in deserts, archaeology and anthropology, because people have lived in deserts, so we can learn a lot about the past. We can learn about different cultures, how they lived in the desert, and just all about past life in deserts. And deserts, I think, can probably make for nice excavation because there's no vegetation. Or expanding south, yes. If the deserts are expanding south, that's also a climate indicator. But yeah, archaeology and anthropology and geology are a heck of a lot easier when there isn't vegetation in the way. And that's why a lot of geology programs will take you to a desert because for intro geology field classes, because there's so much vegetation out here. So they'll drive like a 2-day drive, to a desert spot to teach you. They do them for weed out classes too, because they'll take you down there like in August to like a desert on purpose. That was fun. I did that. We had record-breaking heat my year, so we were in the triple digits. That was great. Another reason why deserts are important is for things like recreation and tourism, believe it or not. There are activities that you can do out in the desert and whatnot. And also, like, there's, for example, Egypt's, the pyramids are in a desert. So that would also be kind of a recreation and tourism to go see that. Another important reason that will be taken far more seriously this quarter for the first time ever is that there are dust storms that cross oceans, as you're seeing depicted in the bottom picture. And these dust storms that cross oceans can contain chemicals and disease organisms. Yes, so windblown dust and silt from deserts can actually transport chemicals and diseases and things like that to other areas. So it's very important to study these so that, we can better protect ourselves, I guess. An example of recreation that you can do in a desert is on slide 3. I don't know that I knew about this until I started researching deserts to teach it. You can do sandboarding in deserts, and I hope someday I get to do this. I'll probably be horrible at it. I was terrible at snowboarding when I was a child, so I imagine I will be terrible at sandboarding too, but it's still fun anyways, even if I'm bad at it. So I was very excited about the fact that that's actually a thing. So let's get on to some more kind of in-depth material. Let's define dry climate. Let's define things like desert. Let's define semi-arid and steppe and all that jazz. So the first term that we're going to go, because we're kind of going to go down like an umbrella, the all-encompassing term would be like dry climate, is the all-encompassing term that is like on the top of the umbrella or the top of the pyramid. If you want to just not worry about defining the area, but it's dry, you can be like, that's a dry climate. So specifically though, in order to qualify though for a dry climate, yearly precipitation has to be less than the potential loss of water by evaporation. So yearly precipitation is less than the potential loss of water by evaporation. What does that mean? That means that the amount of water that you're getting each year, say you're getting, I don't know, throw out a number, quantity of water. You're getting this much water, right, each year. But that has to be less than the amount that can be evaporated each year. So the amount of water that can be evaporated out of that climate is significantly larger than the amount of precipitation that it's getting. Why do we plant orchards out in Eastern Washington? That's a can of worms we won't get into today. Hydrological imbalance, indeed. So you're not getting enough water to replenish what's lost. So then we have two subcategories for dry climate. There is desert and then there's steppe. So let's define desert. In parentheses behind it, you can just write arid for now. We will, on a different slide, get a little more into the weeds with the definition of a desert. And then steppe is semi-arid, so it's not quite as dry. And so semi-arid is what you can put in the parentheses behind steppe. And then some sub-bullet points for steppe, and this is about as in-depth as we're going to go with the term steppe or steppe. I don't know. I say steppe even if it's pronounced steppe. I feel like I've always heard it pronounced steppe, but that could be my dyslexic brain. Anybody else here have like the thing? My brother does it too, where we read words, and if we can't read the word, we just make up a pronunciation for it, and then we forget that we made up the pronunciation for it, and then we like talk in public, and we're like really embarrassed when we get it, and we're like, oh, I forgot that I made up the pronunciation for that when someone corrects us. I guess though that we are not the only people who do that. I guess that there's more out there. But anywho, so some definitions though that you can fill in there is that steppes are marginal, or steppes for Noah, are marginal and more humid variant of a desert. Marginal meaning that they are kind of like on the margins of deserts, right? And also that they are probably not as much a steppe as there is, as there are deserts, but they're a more humid variant of a desert. They serve as a transition zone that surrounds deserts. So typically you don't just go from, a nice tropical area or well-watered area straight into a desert. There's usually a transitional area around it that is steppe or steppe that surrounds the desert. So these are concentrated in the subtropics and in the mid-latitudes. That's where these can be found. All right, so let's go ahead and go on to the next slide and get into the weeds of defining a desert. And deserts are often misdefined. When people think of a desert, we think of very hot, nothing but sand, and nothing grows, there's no water, nothing survives, and maybe there's some cactuses, maybe, and some critters. The picture you see down there below, but that's not exactly the case. None of those things are exactly the case. Deserts vary quite a bit, quite a lot more than you realize, and we'll go over that. So you see the number 10 on the sub-bullet point there for deserts. Deserts get 10 inches or 25 centimeters or less. So 10 inches or 25 centimeters or less rain each year. So that's not a lot. That is not a lot of rain. So you have to have 10 inches or less rain per year. And then additionally, I'm not sure if this statistic is in our books, but we'll throw it in there. They also have 15, that's the next sub-bullet point, 15% or less vegetation. So not a lot of vegetation, but they can have some vegetation. And 30% of Earth's land surface is desert. That's a significant percentage of land mass. Hopefully it doesn't get too much bigger during the life of humans. That's it, by the way. Those two, 10 inches or less of rain per year and 15% or less vegetation are the only two stipulations it needs to be a desert. So in bold on the bottom, what I want you guys to notice that you may not have noticed in the definition is notice that temperature is not a defining factor. It does not need to be hot. Sure, deserts can get hot and they can get very hot, but they can also get cold, and not just during the night. Yes, hot deserts do get very cold during the night. So if you are going to go camping or something in a desert, be prepared for extraordinarily cold temperatures. And by extraordinarily, I mean like getting down to close to freezing, even though it'll be like extraordinarily hot during the day. But no, there can just be like completely cold deserts too. More on that in a bit. Like you can have snow in a desert. They don't just occur, they can occur at the poles, you know, or close to the poles, very high latitudes. Let's see. I see some comments. Marine fossils can be found in deserts, indeed, and there's a lot of fossil excavation that goes on in deserts. Again, lack of vegetation makes this wonderful for working in if you are trying to excavate stuff or locate things like fossils or artifacts. Lack of cloud coverage means no insulation during the night. Indeed, that's why it gets so cold, is because there's no clouds being a nice warm blanket for us. So it gets very cold. Bring a sweater, bring a thermal sleeping bag. Be prepared. So temperature, not a defining factor. Very important. Distribution of Earth's dry climates. And we can see on slide 6 there, a map showing the distribution of the world's deserts, right? And steppes or steppies. And they also have kind of zoomed in on the North America there, showing some of the main deserts, some of the main deserts here in our own country, as well as in Mexico. But yeah, notice that we have deserts in multiple places on the world map. We have them in Australia. We have them along coastlines in places like South America, as well as towards the southern tip of Africa. And then notice that there's also a very large amount of desert at the top of Africa, as well as in parts of Asia. And Australia, there's mostly desert. I never hope to go to Australia. I heard that everything there is literally trying to get you, like all the nature and wildlife and plants, and so I never hope to go there. New Zealand, though. New Zealand. Lord of the Rings. Let's go there. But anyways, so let's move on though to slide 7 and talk about the different types of deserts. And they are largely defined based upon their location on the earth and their geographical location relative to water. So you have subtropical highs is the first of 4 types of deserts that we're going to cover in this class. Some other texts and things will break this down to more types of deserts. And there will be more than 4. For example, in the other book I teach out of, there's more than 4 categories of desert. But for our text, we're just going to kind of amalgamate things into 4 categories. So subtropical highs, also sometimes called the trade wind deserts. Basically, you have the tropical region around the equator for the most part, and then immediately north and south of the tropics, you have deserts. We're going to talk about why in a bit. Second type of desert is middle latitude desert, meaning kind of like even more north and south than that. Places like, you know, the United States kind of latitudes. Then there are the high latitude deserts. So now we're going even farther north and south, and we're talking about places like Canada and northward, parts of Russia and Asia and Europe that are pretty far north, the poles, right? etc. So high latitude. And then the fourth kind of desert that we're going to be talking about are coastal deserts. So again, if you look this up online, what are the 4 types of deserts? You will probably get different answers. A list that is longer than 4, just because this is a brief survey of Earth science and we're not going so in depth and getting too far into the weeds. And then you'll be like, how is this not getting too far into the weeds? Trust me, there's like a whole chapter in a different book I teach out of just about deserts, and there's way more we could talk about. But anyways, let's move on to the next slide where we talk about the first type of desert, and that are the subtropical highs/trade winds. These are caused by air circulation. And we're talking about air circulation on a very large scale in the atmosphere, as depicted in the diagrams on the bottom of that slide. So the sun is most intense at the equator, right? I would like to draw this on a whiteboard, I think, and kind of illustrate this as we go. So let's go ahead and draw our nice blue-green planet right here. So this is planet Earth, right? And then we have, where is my orange marker? There it is. We've got our sun over here. The sun is actually like extraordinarily larger than the Earth. Not to scale. Not to scale. The Earth is like teeny tiny compared to the sun. But anyways, so the sun's rays are going to be most intense at our planet's equator, right? What happens then is that at the equator, you're going to have warm air rise because this sun is heating up. Sorry, I'm getting a glare from my window here. The sun is heating up the air here, causing it to warm, and that warm air rises. So let's draw that here. These red arrows represent the warm air rising away from the Earth. And then you're wondering about what are the more blanks that I can fill in on the second bullet point. It rises and cools, causing rain at the equator. So as it rises up, where's my blue marker? There's a blue marker. So as it continues to rise, I'm going to make these arrows a bit smaller. I think that will serve us a bit better, so that I can try and draw more in here. Hopefully you guys can see this fairly well. Oops. So we've got warm air that's rising. And as it rises, it cools. Right, now I've got some blue arrows showing that it's getting cooler. And it causes rain. Lots of rain here. As that air rises, it condenses, it drops its moisture. Can you guys see that? Kind of, sort of. My arrows are pretty tiny, I'm sorry. And then I've got some blue dashes here showing rain at the equator. And that gives us lots of green things here around the equator. Lots of trees, lots of tropical goodness here at the equator. But then what happens? Warm air, the sun continues to warm air here near the equator, and air continues to rise up and displace the higher altitude cool air. So as a result, this cold air goes and gets pushed off to the sides. But see, this air here, I should use a third marker to not get confused with the color coding that I'm going with here. This air here, though, is dry because we lost all the moisture. It's still cold, but it's dry now. So it gets pushed aside northward and southward, and then it descends back to Earth's surface. But this time it's dry. And when it becomes nearer to Earth's surface, it gets heated up. Still has no moisture because it lost it all here at the equator, at this central portion here. And then as it goes to the sides, to the latitudes to the side here, it is dry and it warms. And then we get these very arid subtropical latitudes. So warm air cools, causes rain at the equator. That is the second bullet point on your slides. The third bullet point is that this dry, cool air up at the top now is pushed aside towards the poles. And then that fourth bullet point is that dense, dry air descends and warms. Not only that, but it actually goes back towards the equator in this particular cell. I believe these are called Hadley cells. Correct me if I'm wrong. Pretty sure they're called Hadley cells. And this actually happens, as you see in the diagram there on the left. This happens here, right? And here as well. So you get this kind of circulating thing going on here and here. Drawing these arrows very poorly. I'm sorry, guys. Wish I had a whiteboard that was gigantic. Right, so you get these Hadley cells going. It's depicted there on the slide. Much better than here, but wanted to go through it step by step rather than looking at one giant slide that you're like, I'm lost and I don't know where to start. So yeah, let's go ahead then and look at the next slide where we see the distribution of the other kind of desert that we're going to be chatting about. I'm trying to put the caps back on my markers. That are middle latitude deserts and rain shadows. See, again, this is more of that. We could break this down as two separate kinds of deserts, but our book is going to mash them together. So middle latitude deserts are caused in two ways. These are deserts that take place in the more like North America and lower parts of Asia and Europe, right? And also we're talking about like, lower parts of or middle parts of South America, as well as part of Africa. Excuse me. So middle latitude deserts are caused, number one, by being located in deep interiors of land masses far away from oceans. So I wanted to draw your attention to looking at Asia. We can see the dark kind of greenish gray color is representative of deserts in this map below. And you can see that there are some spots in Asia that are just in the middle of the continent. They're not really near the coast. We also have some dry, arid areas that are kind of getting towards the interior of the United States. Not quite a solid interior, but pretty far away from oceans that bring water onto the continents. And we've also got desert in the middle of Australia as well. So very in the interior of it. It's far away from oceans. And so basically there is not moisture. The moisture has already left the air by the time it reaches the interior of these continents, or parts of these continents. And that means that there can't be any precipitation. And precipitation and vegetation are what define a desert. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide, slide 10, and define the second reason why deserts occur in mid-latitude areas. They also occur in mid-latitude areas because of rain shadows. That's number 2, is rain shadows. And we have rain shadows here in our own state. We have a rain shadow on the peninsula, and we also, the Olympic Peninsula. What's the city or the name of the town that my friend used to live in? It was super dry, like never rained. It was Squim. Yeah, I think it's Squim. Don't quote me on that. And then we also just, all of Eastern Washington is a rain shadow because of the gigantic Cascade Mountain range. And we get all the water here. And the Cascades get all of the water, and then there's none left. So let's go ahead and define this process for you guys in the bullet point below, kind of defining rain shadows. Let me get caught up and see on your guys' slide where I left spots blank. Oh, I just left the whole bullet point blank. Okay, so what happens in these areas is that the presence of these high mountains, on a coast cause prevailing winds that are carrying moisture from the ocean to drop its moisture as it hits the mountains. So let's illustrate this type of desert here really quick, because that was a lot of words. And you're probably like, I wrote them down, but I don't completely follow. That's okay. Let's do it now. Let's take a look at that now. And we're going to use Washington as an example, right? So we've got our beautiful state here. That's Washington, not to scale. And Puget Sound, right? Seattle's probably about here-ish. And this is the Olympic Peninsula. We have, let's use this marker. Let's use the black marker for mountains. We have some kind of baby mountains over here on the Olympic Peninsula. See those little tiny chevrons I drew? Those are baby mountains. And then we have bigger mountains. That are the Cascade Mountains right here. You've got Stevens Pass going somewhere over here, and then you've got Snoqualmie Pass probably there-ish. Whatever. So mountains here. What happens, we've got all this wonderful ocean out here. Draw some ocean waves here for you guys. We've got this beautiful ocean out here. And this ocean, we get airflow from the ocean bringing moist air over onto our state and going into the continent further forward. However, once this air hits these mountains, it rises and it condenses, and we get a bunch of precipitation right here. And that's why Forks, Washington is so rainy and was chosen to be the location for twilight. So we lose a little bit of moisture here, and we do get kind of a small, not a very big one, but we get like a little rain shadow here. We've also got moisture coming in from elsewhere, right? The Puget Sound, the ocean on the lower part of our state where there are not baby mountains in the way. Northern part there where there is not stuff in the way. And then it hits the mountains, the Cascade Mountains, not the Olympic Mountains. And it rises, it condenses, and we lose a bunch of moisture, right? All here in the Pacific Northwest. And that's why we have all these beautiful evergreen trees here. And then the rest of our state is a desert. So this is Washington. Yeah, a lot of people think that Washington is oh, the evergreen state, it must be green everywhere. It's only green over here in this portion of the state. And then the actual majority of our state is not quite a desert, but it's certainly a dry climate. And there is a rain shadow effect. That rain shadow effect does dissipate a bit as you go further into the continent due to other factors, which we will not talk about in this class. But yeah, that's how you get a rain shadow. All the moisture gets dropped at the mountains, and then there's no moisture left once it goes over the mountains. And no moisture, no precipitation. So that's why I loved living in Ellensburg, because it was sunny most of the year due to the lack of precipitation. And there is a lovely diagram there at the bottom of this slide 10, showing that process with, a much better drawn coast there with mountains on it. And then I've also included a satellite image of our state to show you that most of our state is actually dry. Yeah, poor Eastern Washington. Yeah, and then the Okanagan area is there's a lot of, it's just very different when you go to the Okanagan area and you go up towards Republic and things like that. There's lots of green out there, but it's definitely different trees and different vegetation. And they're getting, as Noah said, a lot of their rainfall due to their higher altitude. So there are more factors at work. But let's look at slide 11 and talk about a little more about, we're going to, transition into the next type of desert, which is a high latitude desert. So the air in these areas is just super cold, and it doesn't hold any moisture, and it's not really bringing much moisture. So we see, this is a photograph, I believe, of the Gobi Desert in Asia. Beautiful. There's actually snow in this low-lying kind of landscape with some high mountains surrounding or up in the far background. But there's actually some snow because this area is cold. And it does precipitate there, but it is still less than 10 inches of rain per year. And you're seeing some of that less than 10 inches per rain on these sand dunes as snow. So let's talk about coastal deserts. I know it's kind of dissatisfying, but other parts of the tundra are also kind of considered these kind of arid climates, and you get different wildlife there as well. So let's also talk about coastal deserts, our last type of desert. So the Atacama Desert, I'm not really familiar with the Atacama Desert, but so it gets cold and it's the driest of them all. So yeah, that's one reason why it's very deceiving to think of deserts as this hot area that gets, triple digit weather in the summers during the day. That's just not true. It really is defined purely by the amount of precipitation it's getting. So let's talk about coastal deserts. These are weird. And as Noah pointed out earlier in the chat, they're rare. So these occur where cold ocean fronts parallel a coast. So what you need to know for this is that not all parts of the ocean are the same temperature. Some parts of the ocean are warmer than other parts of the ocean. Other parts are colder. Out here by Washington, we actually have a warmer ocean, and that's why we get so much moisture here. Is that warm air is carrying some moisture, brings it over here, rises up on the mountains and cools and condenses, gives us lots of precipitation. So these coastal deserts, though, occur where you have cold ocean along the coast of a continent. So occur where cold ocean fronts parallel a coast is that first main bullet point there. And then the sub bullet points are cold water means cold air, which is unable to rise. Because remember, warm air rises, not the cold air. So cold air means, or cold water means cold air, which is unable to rise. And typically forms, and typically the air, it's still kind of moist over the water. And typically it will form a fog or a mist over the ocean water. And you can maybe kind of see that just a tad in the photograph that I put down below, where it looks kind of a little hazy over the ocean in that picture. Not so much over the desert. So essentially, you've got an ocean. It's cold. The air above it's cold because the ocean's not warming it up. There is moisture in this air, but it can't rise up yet. Yet being the key word. However, once this air does finally drop its moisture over the ocean in the form of like a fog or a, mist, and it is now dry. So once the air has dropped its moisture, now dry, it can rise up onto the land. However, that means that it's not bringing moisture with it because it's dry. So there's not going to be precipitation over the land in these areas. You can see these coastal deserts if you go back several slides to any of the maps that I posted, say on slide 9 or 6. And you can see that there is a coastal desert. Probably the most famous is the one on the southern tip of Africa. I need to make this larger so that I can see the name of that desert. That is the Kalahari desert, right? And the Namib desert. Or no, it looks like the Namib is more the coastal one. So there you have it, right? It looks like the Sahara, I think, is more of being a subtropic desert. The fact that it's located just to the north of the equator. So I'm not necessarily sure that there's cold ocean front there. I don't remember. Sorry, guys. But moving on, shall we? Let's go ahead and look at slide 13. I put this slide in here just because it's pretty to look at. Here we have some beautiful star sand dunes. You're going to be learning about all different kinds of sand dunes in your lab, because I'm literally going to give you some Google Earth coordinates, and you are going to type those coordinates into the search bar, and it is going to take you to various deserts around, like 4 deserts around the Earth, and you are going to have to identify the type of sand dunes that are there. Depicted here are some very lovely, innumerable star dunes back away from the water. This is a false color image, but isn't it striking? And you can see some water going through there. Anyways, moving on to slide 14, let's talk about some more relevant stuff. So we're going to now talk about water in arid climates. Water is very important in these arid climates because, let me see where the blanks are for you guys, where I left blanks in. So this first bullet point, there's a blank word at the beginning of it, and that word is water. Water is the next blank most dominant eroding agent. So water is the dominant eroding agent in deserts. It does the most damage to the landscape. Yes, water is not present very often in deserts, only 10 inches of rain each year. However, those 10 inches of rain do a heck of a lot of damage, far more than the wind. People always think that it's the wind in the desert that causes the most damage because they see wind transporting all of these dust and silt and sand. However, it's not actually doing a lot of damage to the landscape. When you get water in there, typically it comes mostly all at once and it just scours the landscape that's already kind of loose and somewhat unconsolidated, and it just scours it. So water is the dominant eroding agent in a desert. Shocking. The next bullet point is that flash floods and water quickly erode dry landscape. And here we can actually see some depictions of water erosion in deserts. And you can see on these slides, we've got these cliffs that have just been, these kind of in picture B, it's labeled B, there are these kind of pinnacles that are just, that's all water erosion. Also, slide D, we're going to be talking about these next. On the next slide, that is a stream that has just a down cut into the landscape, right? And we will talk more about that on the next slide. And then both picture C as well as the picture I included on the right-hand side are slot canyons. And basically, water finds its way into these small, tiny canyons during rain. And they quickly carve out these kind of canyons. And there's like a topographic low, and it just creates a tiny little slot canyon. And water continues to fall, and like water runoff finds its way to these canyons and then falls into the canyon and then continues to flow through the canyon. And you get like sheet wash worth of water just coming into these canyons like a waterfall. It's very dangerous thus to be in these canyons during rainy times. If you are going to go to like Utah or Arizona and want to hike in a slot canyon, gorgeous, beautiful areas. They're just gorgeous. You need to check the weather. And you need to know if it's safe to go in there, because these experience flash floods that have taken many lives. And also so have dry river streams when flash floods occur. One of my teachers, when she was a child, actually probably almost drowned in a flash flood in a dry riverbed. She was picking up marine fossils, fossil shells in the dry riverbed, and then her dad noticed that the rain was coming, and he told my teacher to like get out of the stream, and she wasn't listening because there were so many cool fossils. Yeah, she was a geology teacher. There were so many cool fossils in the river stream, and he ended up just having to like yank her out of the river stream as the flash flood waters came through. So let's talk about those dry river streams in the next slide there. These are called ephemeral streams because they're not dry all the time. Ephemeral streams. And Right after ephemeral streams on this slide, you can write that they only carry water during specific rainfall events. So it's, bring diving gear. They only carry they only carry water during specific rainfall events. So it's not even necessarily a seasonal thing. It's just when it rains. Some sub-bullet points that you can write in there. Did I leave those completely blank for y'all? No, I didn't. So there is a little vegetation in deserts to mediate water runoff. So little vegetation in deserts to mediate water runoff. So when it rains, there's not a lot of vegetation soaking up the water as it rains. So you end up getting with a lot of runoff, or sheet wash, as it were. Flash floods in these areas are thus very common because when it rains, nothing's getting soaked up, and so tons and tons of runoff and forms a flash flood. These are responsible. That's the next bullet point. It's just, again, beating a dead horse with this bullet point. Responsible for most erosion in deserts. Water is responsible for most erosion in deserts. It's that third bullet point there. Let's see, how did I phrase it for you guys? So water is responsible for most erosion. And in that bullet point on that slide, I would really like you guys to italicize and bold the word erosion just to further solidify into your minds that water is the most eroding agent. And then on the sub-bullet point there in the parentheses, for that first blank there, you can say that wind primarily, then please italicize and bold this next word. Wind primarily transports sediment. It doesn't typically do the eroding, the beating up and the pounding off and creating new stuff to be transported. That is done mostly by water. And then some transportation does occur by water. Probably a lot of transportation is done by water, but wind doesn't really do much eroding. It does do some eroding. We're going to talk about that. However, its primary role is not an erosional agent. It is a transportation agent. That's its primary role. So slide 16 is a figure, I believe, straight out of your book. I believe it's just really showing a ephemeral stream when it is dry. And then they came back after a rain event, and we see a ton of water now in the stream. And that water probably won't be there for too long, maybe like a couple days. And then it will be dry again. I want to point out that there are videos you can find online if you want to watch a flash flood occurring in an ephemeral stream. I've seen pictures of people who are not very smart. They are basically thrill seekers who go out and they try to outrun flash floods. They'll literally stand in the ephemeral stream bed. These are, by the way, sometimes called arroyos. Honestly, I'm used to calling them arroyos. They will stand in these arroyo ephemeral stream beds and wait for the flash flood and then film themselves with their phones, filming the water, running away from it. On the one hand, I'm so grateful for the documentation so that I can see what a flash flood looks like. However, it's not worth risking your life for, and please never stand in a stream bed during a rain event in the desert. All right, just a few more slides to go through here, and we'll actually be done pretty early today. Let's see. Or should I maybe, you know what? I think I'm actually probably going to save these slides for basically slides 17, 18, 19, and 20. They're talking about wind as an erosional agent. Remember, I said its primary role is transportation, and we are going to talk about both transportation, how it transports during slides 17 and 18. And then in 19 and 20, we're going to talk about how it erodes. I think I will go back in and actually change the titles of those slides from wind erosion on slide 17 and 18 to wind transportation, because really those two slides are not about erosion, they're about transportation. And then slides 19 and 20 talk about what kind of landscapes you get as a result of both erosion, their erosional landscapes for when erosion does happen, and transportation of that material away from there happens. So we'll talk about that more though. We'll finish those slides and we'll add a bunch too. Not a bunch, probably like 10 more slides I'll add after that to go over on our next lecture. But go ahead and go down to slide 21. I have here, there's actually there are 5 types of desert sand dunes depicted on this slide. And I believe I have this same image or a similar image that will be on your lab, one of the pages of your lab, because like I said, you're going to be using Google Earth to go to specific coordinates that I provide for you. And you're going to go to each of these 4 deserts and look at the sand dunes there, and you're going to identify the sand dune. Notice that these sand dunes are not only defined by shape, but they are also defined by wind direction. So, for example, we see kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 primary shapes. However, even though there's 5 of them, the wind direction matters. So go ahead and look at the top left one, which is a Barchan dune, and then go ahead and look at the middle right. Sorry guys, dyslexia. Middle right slide, and there is parabolic dunes. Notice that these are the same shape. They're all U-shaped kind of, or I can't really make a very effective U. They're all kind of U-shaped streams. They're all U-shaped dunes. However, the I don't remember what it's called, but the tails of the dunes face different ways depending on the wind direction, and that's going to define the difference between the two. And then we're also going to talk about how wind. We're also going to talk about how wind forms these sand dunes in our next meeting on Wednesday. Who's excited that Wednesday isn't the final? I know I am. Who's excited that we actually have that one additional week that myself and other educators this quarter didn't realize we had because of the extraordinarily numerous changes due to the, my Sharona Cyrus popping up and just making muck of everything. Yeah, quarter went by so quickly. Normally next week would actually be like also a lecture week. But I didn't realize that we had that extra week. So I literally crammed all of the material into these weeks, which means that Monday you get to turn in your lab on Monday, next Monday. Awesome. You have more time to work on that. The focus questions aren't due early. They are due on Thursday of this week. And Monday, I want you guys to take the time to study. I will be here for available for Zoom or Hangout, Google Meets, Google Hangouts meetings. If you guys have review questions or questions about any of the material that we've covered that you're a little shaky on. So Monday is study day. So we already covered everything. And then next Wednesday will be our final at 3:00. So anywho, though, really quickly before I let you guys go, look at slide 22. This is just kind of a quick tutorial on how to use Google Earth. There's a link at the top to a WikiHow that I found pretty helpful for showing just kind of the basics of Google Earth. And it shows you where the search bar is in the top left corner. And that is where you are going to be typing in the coordinates as I have typed them for you in the lab. So you don't have to put a name in there. You can literally just put coordinates. And then once you get to your location, for some of them, you'll need to zoom way out. And it says that on the lab, which one's like, hey, once you get to this coordinate, zoom way out. So it says that there on the lab if you need to zoom way the heck out in order to see these sand dunes. And then you'll also want to play around with using the compass, which is what the second picture is pointing to. You'll want to be able to change direction so that you can really examine these sand dunes. You want to zoom in, you want to zoom out so that you can really get a sense for what the shape is. Pay attention to where the north is, though. And if you want to reorient your picture of these coordinates back to north, there's a tiny N on that compass that the red arrow in the bottom picture is pointing to, and you just double click the N and it will reorient it back so that north is at the top of the screen and south is at the bottom of the screen. Why do you need to do this? Because wind direction tells you whether it's a bar sand dune or a parabolic dune, and that's going to be really important to know which way is north when you're looking at these pictures and you're deciding, okay, so my wind is coming from which direction, that's which part of the screen, knowing that north is the top of the screen. People get it confused quite frequently, and I get mixed matched answers for that. Also, some of these, I gave you only 4 coordinates, and there's 5 different types of dunes. However, it is not a guarantee that each of these dunes is a different type of dune. There may be some repeats in there. So you will want to pay close attention, again, to the wind direction and which way is north, so that you can figure out the wind direction. Yeah, and then also some of these locations, you can take the little orange guy who's below the compass in that top right corner, and you can drag him onto the map. And some of these locations actually have photographs. You can go down into the sand dunes in what is called street view, and you will thus then be able to get even more an idea of the shapes of these dunes that are at these locations. So highly recommend playing around with it before you make your final decision on what type of dune it is. Some of them are more obvious than others. Some of them are not. I really get all kinds of answers for which type of dune it is, and it's almost like people just picked them out of a bag at random, and I'm like, that's not even close. Please try. Do your best. Ask me if you have questions, or you can even email me if you want to check answers. That's fine. That will steer you in the right direction. Okay, so that's it for today. Yay, we're done pretty early for not a 2-hour lecture for today. I see that Noah would like to do a live chat. If anyone else would also like to do a live chat, please let me know in the comments, and I will send an invite to your email that you will click on, and it will take you to I think we're going to, again, do a Google Hangouts, Google Meets. Otherwise, have a great week, or not a great weekend or week, but we'll be seeing each other in just a few days. But have a great rest of your day, a great Tuesday. I will have the lab and the focus questions up this evening. I'm not sure what time exactly. It depends on when dinner and other activities finish that will take place right after this. And depends on when I get those finished, when I can get back to working. So yeah, have a great evening. Again, just leave your name in the comments if you would like to have an invite to the live chat. I will start getting that set up. All right. Well, I don't see any names in the chat for an invite in addition to Noah. So I think I will end the live stream then. And if you would like to meet with me at a different time, please let me know. Just simply like send me an email with a preferred time for maybe like the next day, since I'm not completely glued to my email, or at least sometime in several hours from then that you would like to meet to go over stuff. And I'm more than happy to help you guys however I can. I really love helping students. That's why I'm a teacher, because it's what I love to do. But yeah, so let me know if there's any way that I can help you. If you want to meet via Zoom or Google Hangouts at a different time, send me an email, like I said, saying, hey, would this time frame tomorrow work for you to meet with me? And I'll be like, sure, or no, how about this time? So yeah, anyways, have a great rest of your day and have an awesome tomorrow. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Bye, guys.